I'm Bailey of Farmer Bailey Plugs and Perennials and Plants and Pest Control Agents, evidently. We have some really exciting news today, in addition to the fact that we're going to learn a lot. We're starting just a really casual, informal, friendly relationship with Koppert and natural enemies, where you can get some biological control agents to help you grow plants better. But mostly we're here to learn today. When we had the farm in Vermont, I found biological controls to be really fascinating. They not only require that you understand the life cycle of your pathogen or your pest, but the life cycle of the biological agent that you are trying to integrate into your system. So we're going to learn a lot about that today. Thankfully, I'm not the one teaching you. It's really nerdy stuff, and I am a self-professed nerd, so I really like this kind of thing. It does require you to educate yourself. There's a lot of detail to figure out. We're really fortunate that Koppert and natural enemies have teams of people standing by who know everything there is to know about this type of stuff, and they are happy to help tailor solutions to your problem. So just before we get going, I just want to show you something we're really excited about on the website. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So you're familiar with the Farmer Bailey website. You can select which catalog you'd like to shop. But we have a new little button down here at the bottom. If you protect your crops with BioControls, if you just click there, it's going to take you to naturalenemies.com. And these are products that we have worked with Koppert to particularly select for issues we know affect a lot of cut flower growers. They have a full range. If you have a problem that's not addressed by these products, by all means, ask them. This little chat button down on the bottom, I believe, links to real live people. We'll learn more about that later. But if you click here, you can ask questions as you have them. We're here to help you. Natural Enemies is here to help you. So we're just excited about this all around. Great. I had a little technical difficulty earlier, but it worked. Without further ado, I'm going to throw this over to Kristen and Heidi. I guess Kristen's going to drive the bus today. If you have questions, by all means, pop them in the chat. We'll get to them mostly at the end, but it's going to be a really casual conversation. I'm sure I'll interrupt you more than you like, Kristen. But
Okay.
welcome. We're very happy to have you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully my computer behaves itself since we have literally everyone here.
Right.
So yes, my name is Kristen Fowler. I am the technical sales consultant for Koppert Biological. I first want to give a huge thank you to Farmer Bailey and the team. I was able to participate in the cut flower tour that was last fall back in the Netherlands. So shout out to all my new friends from that tour. I think being able to see how Farmer Bailey's team and the growers interact really helped me see how much our philosophies and our core values align as much as Koppert works with our growers. Bailey's team, we want our growers to succeed. So thank you very much. I am also joined today by Heidi Doering, who is our ornamental crop team lead. I would do a disservice to her by even trying to put her CV on a PowerPoint slide. Heidi has an immense background in horticulture. She was a graduate from, I believe, the University of Wisconsin, and born and raised in the Midwest. She's exactly what you would think a Midwesterner would be. She's sweet as pie and tough as nails, and she can grow some plants. She's also worked internationally. She worked for an orchid grower in the Netherlands, as well as a nursery in France. She was a head grower back here in the United States. She's also worked for cut flower growers and wholesalers as a sales consultant. She also worked for the Wisconsin Extension before coming to Koppert. So she's been with us for almost 9 years. And I lovingly and jokingly say I want to be like Heidi when I grow up, and I truly mean it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So who is Koppert? Koppert was founded in 1967 by Jan Koppert, who was a Dutch grower who grew a lot of agricultural crops. And he was noticing a resistance for conventional pesticides on his cucumbers. And in his observations, he was noticing that there was this little red mite that was attacking those two-spotted spider mite. And wherever those red mites were, he didn't have spider mites. So in the idea of there has to be a better way, he figured out how to start rearing the Phytocylus persimilis mite and started selling it to his neighbors and friends who were growing in the area. So yeah, we were started in the late 60s. And we essentially started the industry. This photo here is our headquarters in Berkels de Roderijs, which is about 30 minutes north of Rotterdam. We are now we have about 24 subsidiaries, and we have distribution in over 100 countries. In the United States, our home base is in Howell, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. We have an office in Oxnard, California, and when we partnered with Natural Enemies, that became our Portland, Oregon office for our retail sales. We have production both domestically and from abroad. So we are both bringing in insects from the Netherlands, as well as producing our own here in Michigan. Koppert is split into several teams. There are so many crops that we work in that we have protocols for. It just makes sense to have it divvied up. The names are pretty self-explanatory. We have the agri team, the horty team, the hydro, and pollination. So the agri team is in our agricultural crops, strawberries, tomatoes, peppers. The horty team, which Heidi and I are a part of, are ornamentals and cannabis. The hydroponic team, exactly what that means is hydroponic lettuce, tomatoes, and then in pollination. So we also rear 2 different species of native bumblebees to the United States, which also helps play into the hydroponics, especially for tomatoes when they need to be pollinated indoors. We work outdoors as well. And as we said, Natural Enemies is our online retail brand that we work with direct to growers, to homeowners and small growers. If larger growers tend to have an account with Koppert, but all products that are sold on the Natural Enemies websites are Koppert products. And one of the core values that Koppert has that I align myself with the most is that we work for growers. Most of us are former growers ourselves, so it means something us to be able to help our people. So that's who Koppert is, and who am I? So I am the technical sales consultant for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Colorado for the time being. I picked that state up last year, so I get to take some travels a few times a year, which is exciting. I currently live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I'm originally from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which is why I have this accent. It's not quite Southern, it's not quite Northern, so I have to speak slowly and remember to put the endings back on my words. I graduated from Salisbury University with a degree in biology. Then I went back to school up here in Bucks County at Delaware Valley College, which is now Delaware Valley University in Doylestown. After graduating the first time, I worked for the IR4 program, which is the EPA program for pesticide residue studies, where I really learned a lot about applying pesticides, mixing them, and how they're registered. I've worked on numerous farms and greenhouses. I did start my own professional gardening service when the economy tanked back in 2009 and I was laid off. In the winter times, I didn't shovel snow, and I started actually working at Grow and Sell in the shipping department for the winter. I was hiding in their greenhouses. Once they figured out that I actually knew how to grow plants and do things, the next winter I was hired as an assistant grower. Fast forward, when I needed health insurance and life changes happened, I became the veg grower for Grow and Sell. After I left Grow and Sell, I worked at Longwood Gardens as a propagator and senior grower here in Pennsylvania. And when I was at Grow and Sell and some of the other greenhouses, that was when I became introduced to Koppert. So I am a former, as I put in here, I'm a former Koppert customer. The yellow sticky trap that you see in that photo underneath the boom is one of our signature mass trapping cards that we love. So that's what my job used to look like, and this is what my job looks like now. I'm always looking for bugs. So that's who I am.
Kristen, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Go for it.
Just to clarify, when you said you're the veg grower, that's not the vegetable grower, that's the vegetative
propagation
grower.
Correct. Yes.
So
I was not growing the seed crops, but I was growing anything that came in a cutting. That was me. So
tissue culture. So all of those, the scoop scabiosas, now we have the full range of limonium coming from TC. That's the kind of stuff that you were in charge of. Could be a little more technical than some of the seed things.
A lot of the echinaceas.
Yep. You have a lot of firsthand experience with the early part of the lives of the plants that everyone in this seminar are familiar with.
Absolutely. So taking those cuttings and making them grow roots, that's what I'm good at. So going into the presentation here, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of skip over the natural pollination. However, if anybody wants bumblebees or needs pollination, that's a further discussion we can have later. Going into the biological pest control aspect, there is kind of a macro and a micro portion to this. Not only are we trying to control the insect pests that are on the foliage, but we're also trying to control what is also down in the soil. So we have insect pests that are feeding on the leaves, but we also have multiple life stages, sometimes of the same species, that are both happening above ground and below. So sometimes, a lot of times we're trying to figure out how to break the life cycle. And so going after multiple stages can really be beneficial to dropping the populations down. So we're trying to treat both above and below. And not only do we have soil insects, but there are also, that is where a lot of soil pathogens begin, is in the soil, whether it's too wet. So sometimes native soils just have them present. So we need to really focus on making sure that we have the healthy roots to support the healthy shoots. And again, as we are all very familiar, I'm sure that biological diseases can blow in onto the foliage. We're dealing with things like botrytis and powdery mildew that are in the air that naturally come in. There's also the monitoring and trapping. Especially, I know some folks may be familiar with pheromone traps for moths and certain beetles. That it's a great way to also monitor as well as remove them from the environment. Same with sticky traps. A lot of times our protocols will be like, we jokingly say, make it yellow in that greenhouse, because if you're trapping them, they're not able to reproduce and contribute to the life cycle. We're interrupting that. So who can use bios? If you grow plants, you can use BioControls. I use BioControls here in my plant office. We work a lot with soft fruit growers, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, strawberries. My team specializes with ornamental growers. We're also trying to work with retail and home growers as well. Legal cannabis growers, state by state, the regulations are different in what chemicals and processes they will allow. So focusing on BioControls really does help cannabis growers produce a healthy crop. And indoor and outdoor. One of my conversations with one of the growers on the flower tour was, oh, well, I can't really use them because I'm growing outside. And if we weren't working in outdoor crops, we wouldn't have much of a business. When it comes to large acreage, we will actually do applications via drone because it just takes too long to walk through the crop and sprinkle them out yourself. And we also are focusing on specialty crop growers, all of you, cut flower growers. We work in hops, grapes, even mushrooms. People don't think about that, but there's a lot of flies and there's fungus that attack fungus. And we've just started our new commodity crop team, which seems counterintuitive to start with other crops and not the biggest ones, but those are the hardest horses to kind of budge to shift into new ways of thinking, but we're trying. All right, so I've been using this term biocontrols. What does that mean? Biocontrols are natural predators, parasitoids, and or microbes that are utilized to target pests and other pathogens. I like to consider it kind of like you would a pesticide, where they have modes of actions, or MOAs. One of the main MOAs is predation, being actively fed on. So you have one species that is literally eating the other. It's kind of a brutal existence, but that's how nature works. Parasitization, I can't say it. It's laying eggs in a pest that incubate inside of that pest, and then they hatch out. So it's kind of the insect pest becomes a host species for the biological control. Mostly these are parasitoid wasps and entomopathogenic nematodes. That word I can say, that's a fun Scrabble word. And I'll get to this later, but when I say wasps, I'm not talking about the ones that, attack you at a picnic. They're very small and very innocuous. You won't even notice they're there. We talk about microbes. So beneficial bacteria and fungi that are used to combat other bacterial and fungal issues is essentially like fighting fire with fire. So, they're both competing for that territory. So it's, battling against one another. The two, we refer to them commonly as biofungicides and mycoinsecticides, which you can kind of break those words apart and realize that it's a biofungicide using a biological product, or an insecticide that is using a beneficial fungus. Some examples of these would be beneficial bacillus, trichoderma, Eiseria and Bovaria are the most common ones that you'll see on the market. There are others, but that's what I'm focusing mostly on today. So proper pest identification helps you determine which biocontrols and which route that you want to take. So it's always important to get the best ID that you can to determine the path forward. Let's see here. I like to leave this one in, other forms of biocontrols. I know a lot of us, have farm cats, or we actually have a Teams thread that says IPM cats. We've opened it up to dogs, goats, and chickens, but, and this was also a toad that lived in the back of my greenhouse at Grow and Sell and helped with the fungus gnat problems. But I know a lot of you probably have very healthy native environments that you grow in, and you may not have significant pest issues because you've done a great job at supporting that natural environment. You probably have natural predators coming in as well. So that's always a fun slide to leave. So we're going to start with microbial biocontrols. So biofungicides and mycoinsecticides. I often say that microbials are a great way to start integrating biocontrols into your program. A lot of folks are very familiar with already applying foliar applications or soil applications, whether it's a foliar fertilizer or feeds, compost teas, or even pesticides, if oil sprays, depending on the level of what you're working with. The beneficial bacteria species that we're talking about. There are numerous species that are incorporated in a lot of products in the environment or in the industry. Mostly it's beneficial bacillus, Bacillus subtilis, amyloliquefactions, and Bacillus pumilus are probably your top 3 heavy hitters. There are some products on the market that kind of throw the kitchen sink at it. And it's not that they aren't also effective, but the industry has really narrowed down the heavy hitters and the strains that are working the strongest. The beneficial fungus that we have is Trichoderma harzianum, strain T22. That one's been in the industry for quite some time, and it is an incredible product to use, especially with starting plants out at transplant and for plant protection. There is like a Venn diagram of what some will treat, and sometimes the pathogens are the same, sometimes they're slightly different. But some of the diseases that these products address are botrytis, Pythium, Fusarium, Rhizoctonium, the Labiopsis. There's a lot of them, but these are like the most frequent ones that are most commonly seen. So moving on to the beneficial fungus and mycoinsecticide, Eiseria fumarosea and Bovaria bassiana. Bovaria bassiana is commonly known as Tanagar. Biosears, it's been in the industry for quite some time. Eiseria is one of the products that we carry. We have several products listed that I may end up using interchangeably. I'll try to do my best to stay along the same line. But we have Microflora SA, which is subtilis and amyloliquefactions. That is our foliar feed and soil amendment. We have an EPA registered biofungicide called Bacillrid, and that is Bacillus amyloliquefactions. It's our own strain. Trianum P, which is the trichoderma product, and Eiserid, which is the Eiseria fumaroseus. And how do they work? So these products are essentially applied as you would apply a pesticide. So they can be foliar sprays, they can be soil applications, they can do it as a spray or a drench. There's a fun word called a sprench, which is like a spray to drip. So you're spraying it to drip and then it hits that top part of the root zone. Biofungicides like Trianum and Trichoderma, when you apply them to the soil, the spores colonize that root zone and they get into the root epidermis, and then they start to create a protective barrier that does not allow the other pathogens entrance into the root zone. Microflora and Bacillrid, they can be applied to the foliage as well as to the soil. They have the same colonizing effect and protection. Eiserid is a cordyceps fungus. So if you're familiar with the show and or video game The Last of Us, where the mushrooms were growing out of the people, it's kind of gruesome, but it essentially works the same way. So it is just dextrose and spores that you mix up into water, and those spores then attack the soft-bodied insects, and it enters into the outer chitin layer of the insect. It goes inside and does its magic, and then it sporulates outside of it. So it's kind of gruesome, but it's actually really cool because it's one of those products where you can actually see it work. That product targets thrips, fungus gnats, shore flies, mealybug, which is a huge one, especially in conservatories and pet plants that have been sitting for a long time. It also works to aphids to some degree, but aphids shed so quickly. We do generally recommend, adding a little extra something, especially like an IGR to the tank mix, just to, aphids are, they're diabolical. One important thing to remember is that multiple applications are often required throughout the crop cycle at various intervals. You're applying these products to an environment, whether it's indoors or outdoors, and they are susceptible to what is happening around you. I often tell my growers to think like a mushroom. You want that Goldilocks zone of temperature, moisture levels, and spore presence, or bacterial presence. If you have a rain, you have a drought, those types of things can affect the inoculum that is there. So reapplying is very important to just ensure that it is present and it is doing its job, because it is also kind of fluctuating with the environment around you. I like to speak a lot in analogies and similes because it helps my brain make sense of things. But I often will say it's kind of a rock, paper, scissors. You can use, if you were to use all three of these in your crops, like Icerid and Bacillus play really good together, but Bacillus and Trichoderma do not. So you need to leave a little bit of a window. So it's one kind of beats the other. Some play well together. It's just, so it's important to know the timing of your applications and what you're using to know who plays well with one another.
As everyone can see by the number of different species and even strains of certain species of certain genera, this is really complicated technical stuff. Unfortunately, you don't need to learn all of it, but you do need to be a part of it and learn specifically how to identify what your problem is in the first place. And then these folks have exactly, the predator or the enemy that is targeted towards your pathogen or your pest.
And if you don't know the pathogen, a lot of local extension agents or universities do have labs that you can send samples to. So it can be very difficult to self-diagnose certain pathogens because a lot of them look the same. And the photos that you see in textbooks and online, you can't always trust. They look the same. So you can always
I think new growers especially, if you spend any time on Facebook, people are like, what's eating this? Or just show something going wrong and say, what do I spray? And the reaction, the instinct is just to reach for a spray, but you really got to know what the problem is first so you can fix it. So
absolutely.
I really appreciate all the research that you all have done and that you continue to do year by year.
Absolutely.
Well, the red dot's gone. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So this is a nice kind of photographic of kind of how Triatom's working. So we're going to start over here on the top left. So as you can see here, the green represents the Trianom mycelia. And as I mentioned before, it is populating the epidermis of that root zone or of the root tissue. And it's not allowing the pathogens to enter. It's like started its turf war, it's winning. Depending on the pathogen, sometimes Trianom can actually parasitize it and kill it off, which is actually pretty awesome. And where it takes over in the root zone, because it wants to live, it wants to survive, it is then now increasing the uptake of your macro and micronutrients as well as the water. And so it promotes that yield and that growth above ground. So again, it comes back to healthy roots and healthy shoots, which then also helps induce resistance for other foliar pathogens that may be in the environment, as well as weather, hot, cold, depending on the season that we're growing in. Let's see, come on. There we go. So this is what I mean by the Icerid. Once you see it, you know that it's working. So picture here on the left is a Western flower thrips that has the Iceria spores sporulating out of its body. It can be a little bit jarring. We get a lot of photos where our growers are like, what is this? It's like, it's working. That's awesome. I'm going to save this. On the right-hand side, that was a mealybug. That was at I have a rose breeder that I work with. And this was in the breeding greenhouse that they have, which they breed for a certain period of time, then they clean it out, and then they bring in new material. Sometimes that new material is actually old and it's got a lot of problems on it, and there were pesticide residues, and the biologicals that we were using for the mealies weren't working. And once we started introducing icerid, I got the phone call of like, send me more. And I was like, I need to see it work. And so that's an example of mealybug infestation that got taken care of, which is awesome. So I wanted to kind of step back for a second and talk about what I mean by spraying, drenching, applying. There are multiple ways that you can do this depending on the size of your grow, whether you're growing in just your backyard garden or you have several 100-foot rows or you're on acreage. There are different tools and methods that you can use. The first one that I learned on was the Red Solo hand pump backpack sprayer. It's great for small areas because, again, you're having to keep the pressure in the tank by pumping it with your hand. But it does work. It gets the job done. It can be a little physically exhausting if you have a large territory to treat. Down below is the Dram battery powered backpack sprayer. Carries about 3 gallons. You charge it up and it runs for several hours. The nice thing about it is it does have an agitator in it, so it keeps the product in solution and it keeps it moving around. If you have a greenhouse or a larger space, the hydraulic sprayers tend to work really well. You can park it at the front of the greenhouse and then run the hose down through the benches and apply that way. On the right-hand side is an example of a portable injector. There are a couple of different brands. There's Dosatron and Anderson are the two that I'm most familiar with. This one's just attached to a dolly. Some greenhouses have them physically attached to the walls if they're doing the fertilizer injector or compost teas. This is great to be able to mix your concentrate or mix your application products in the bucket. Then you stick in the filter, and then you put the watering hose attached to it, go to town, do your drenches. So those are some examples. You can also, again, if it's super small area, you can still use one of the hand pump sprayers that you get at your local hardware store. Those will also work as well. So that kind of covers our microbial products. One thing I do want to say, just kind of throw this in here. One of my takeaways from the flower tour was the need for Fusarium protection in the Lisianthus. So we started working with Grow and Sell to start incorporating the Trianum applications in the plug form. So again, coming back to that, I should probably go back to that slide, but it has been given the application in the plugs. So when you get them, it's been inoculated. But when you get them, you need to reintroduce at transplant, because as those new roots grow, you need to put more spores back down into that soil to help inoculate the new growth that comes out. And then a few weeks later, as those roots continue to spread, do it one more time just to get it protected. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that we were on the forefront of thinking ahead of that to at least get you guys some quality products that are going to work for you. So predators, coming back to where I started from, the photo on the top left is the Phytocylus persimilis mite body slamming a 2-spotted spider mite. So this was the mite that Jan Koppert found and started rearing. These are probably one of our top sellers that we work with. They can be used to target spider mites, thrips, whitefly, broad and russet mites, and a few other species, but those are the most common. Here are some fun Latin names for the insect species that we use. I can actually say these. So we have the Phytocylus persimilis. We have Neocylus californicus, Amblysius forskii, and Amblysius cucumaris. Those are our top 4. However, we have so many mite species. We work with several other, especially depending on the time of year. There's also the Andersoni mite, the Lamonicus mite. There's a lot of different ones. I also recommend, if you are on the Koppert website, please make sure it says KoppertUS.com. I have a lot of growers who ask me questions about mites, like, oh, can I get this one? And it's like, that's not available in the United States. We can't bring that in. It might be available in Spain or in the UK, but we cannot bring it over legally. So as well as for foliar mites, we also have mites that work down in the soil. So the Stratiolaelaps scomitis, that feeds on the fungus gnat larva and Thrips pupae down in the soil. They persist for several weeks. I use them in my house plants, especially after I repot. I give a little dose to every one of them because I never know how long that soil has been sitting in the garden center. And, there's always that mass exodus of fungus gnats that come up after you do some repotting. So going back to the rock, paper, scissors concept, there's kind of a similar situation here with the mites as well. There's a fun phrase called intra-guild predation, where some of the mites will actually eat each other. So we've had growers who thought that they were doing the right thing. They're like, oh, we're going to hammer it. And they throw in Swirsky and Cucumaris to treat for the thrips. But what they don't realize is the Swirsky and the Cucumaris are fighting each other, and then their thrips blow up. And they've kind of gotten away scot-free without being preyed upon at all. So you want to make sure that you're applying the correct ones, and that's where the Koppert consultants and any will be able to help you determine which ones are the best to use. They come in bulk products, either in these bottles like this. We do have some that are in larger cardboard tubes for larger mite counts. For example, this Swirsky mite is a 50,000 count. There's 50,000 mites in that. We have others that are 125,000 that cover a large square footage, as well as tubs. And we also have sachets. I know some folks may be familiar with the paper sachets on a stick in hanging baskets and in some of their annual crops. Here, pictured on the top right is the Swirsky or the Spical, the Californicus Ultimate sachet that we created for low humidity environments. So sometimes, depending on, taking in all those environmental factors, we have the right product for the right conditions. This is an example of one of our distribution units. This is called the mini AirBug. I think we missed the opportunity to call it the Bugzooka, but it was named before I started with Koppert. But as you can see here, it has a rotating drum at the top with the white section. You can change the aperture on it to drop more or less product as you are walking through. Down here into the center is a small fan. So it acts almost as if a leaf blower, but it's nice and gentle. There are a lot of application devices on the market. The one thing I ask you to consider is the ease at which they land. Our goal is to make sure that they land with legs. We don't want to be blasting them out with super high pressure. We don't want anything grinding them up. The whole goal is for them to land and start to run. I had a grower who was using a solo backpack sprayer, and he's like, oh, but I can hit the end wall from standing way back here. And I was like, that's great, but do they have legs? You got the distance, but it's not a spray, and these are living creatures. So take that into consideration when applying. You can also do the salt shaker method. That works as well. But it's connected to this fashionable fanny pack with a rechargeable battery that you can go through and clear out apply to your greenhouse with ease. Continuing with predation. Some folks might be familiar with Aureus insidiosus. It's a naturally occurring predator that will sometimes just natively and naturally find your crops. I call it the minute pirate bug. If you call it the minute pirate bug, that's fine. But they feed on adult thrips. And in the absence of thrips, it does become a generalist predator and will feed on other species. One really awesome attributing factor to it is if you do have open flowers with pollen present, it can also feed on pollen. So it will tend to keep it around a little bit more often and help and boost those populations. Chrysoperla carnea, the green lacewing larva, another species that a lot of folks maybe be familiar with because they do occur naturally in the United States. The main target that it wants to eat is aphids. But again, like Aureus and the lack of aphids or lack of presence of aphids, it will target other species, thrips and mealybug to some extent. Delosia coraria, also known as a theta. Taxonomists like to throw us around a little bit and change things up. I think rosemary is now a salvia. So depending on, which one you like to choose, I know, depending on which way you want to go, we refer to it as a theta, but those are rove beetles. They're a generalist predator that rove around in the soil, kind of taking care of the multiple stages of different pests that are living in the soil, like Thrips pupa and fungus gnat larva. I often joke that They are the ones that will survive the apocalypse. They'll be there with the rats and the cockroaches. Like once you have a theta, you have them for a while. Even my cannabis growers find them in indoor facilities in the walls and stuff. Like they find a way. Cryptolaemus montezorii, that's the mealybug destroyer. It's in the ladybird or the ladybug family, but it's a black beetle. We sell both the larva and the adults. The adults have been proving really beneficial for our grapevines because they're able to fly to other rows and then start to reproduce. We generally tend to stick with the larvae for the most part because they are the part of the life cycle that's trying to eat the most to become an adult. So they're a little bit more hungry, a little more voracious. You get a little bit better control with the adults. Sometimes the adults can fly off. So here's a moment. If you don't like National Geographic things, you can look away. I will fast forward a little bit because it is a long video, but this is what a lacewing larvae looks like when it is eating a melon aphid or Aphis gossypii. So we'll go ahead and start it here. But you can see his piercing mouth parts have chomped down. There's some hemolymph or insect blood starting to come down. And I realize if I go to about 53, we get towards the end here. I'll just keep it moving. But yeah, you can see it. If you also notice the other aphids they're still. They're like, the dinosaur is here. We don't move. It won't notice us. But then it continues, it gets the job done, tosses it away. There's the chicken bone, and then it's off. So it's pretty awesome. I love them.
That's fabulous. Can I send that? Can you send that video to me so I can just fall asleep watching it every night?
Absolutely. I love that you love it. That makes me happy. I never know. Sometimes it gives people the ick, so I have to be careful. All right, so we're going to start talking about parasitoids. Pictured here is one of our Aphidius species. These target pests like aphids, whiteflies, caterpillars, grubs. This Aphidius here, like when I say wasp, this is to scale. So they are very tiny. They could be confused with a fungus gnat or a shore fly. However, the one dead giveaway is those super long antennae that are coming off that are segmented. That definitely gives it away that it's a good guy. You can see here that it's laying its ovipositor into the egg. We have multiple different species, Aphidius colmani, Matricariae, and Urvi, used to control different aphid species. Again, it comes down to identification. Knowing which aphid you have determines which wasp you use. So you can't just throw a wasp at it and it's like, oh, well, that's not the right one. It doesn't like that one. It hasn't evolved to work in that species of aphid. So send us pictures, ask us questions, get a proper ID, then we can know which ones to roll with. There's also whitefly parasitoids, Eremoceras and Encarsia. Again, to see that they're actually working, it's a visual cue, much like Icerid. You'll find aphid mummies, as we call them, or you'll see the whitefly larvae start to become discolored, where they're usually kind of white or clear or yellow. They'll become a dark black, dark gray color, and you're like, okay, see that it's working. We ship these in bottles. Some also come on cards, so depending on the species you use, they come in different ways. Yeah, so I have pictures here. So here's what we talk about when we're saying aphid mummies. The one on the left is on a cannabis crop. So you can see that there's an opening on it where the wasp has emerged out. So that was a successful parasitization. Over here on the right-hand side, I think that was actually my plumeria that I had on my deck a few years ago. But that swollen one in the middle that is brown, that's a sign that it's working. And I think you can probably see a few others on there. I think the one on the left may be starting to turn. So it's a good visual cue. This is how we sell them. This will be what comes to you. We literally sell you those mummies in a bottle. And if you see a lot of activity, that's not a good sign. You actually kind of want to, not see much in the wasps when you put them out. We have these dye boxes that you can distribute throughout your greenhouse or throughout your grow space, and then you can distribute the bottle through it and divvy it up. Down below is the example of the intermix card or the two whitefly parasitoids. Here we have like the larvae that are on the card, and they emerge from that card. This is in a tomato crop, so it's a great way to control whitefly. This is probably one of my favorites. Again, I could do a whole presentation on nematodes by themselves. But again, this is another one of those gateway bios that people, I think, can really start incorporating into their systems, into their IPM programs. This definition here is super long, but I think it's just really cool because what it's doing is it's going into the insect pest and it's like creating this just awful environment internally. It's releasing a bacteria that kills it, and then it liquefies its insides that provides food for the other nematodes that are about to emerge. You can see here, there's the microscopic picture of what the nematodes look like. And then here's an example of a caterpillar that has been treated on a pepper plant that has started to turn to mush, which is exactly what we want to see. Some of the species that we use, Steinernema feltiae, that targets fungus gnat larvae, Thrips pupa in the soil. It's very common. We use it a lot in cannabis as well as in propagation. Those pests are very, where you have a wet environment, those species tend to be more prevalent. Steinernema carpocapsae is a species that we use for caterpillars, grubs, shorefly larvae. We've had a lot of success with it with red-headed flea beetle. Heidi can address that later. I saw some of the folks asking questions about beetles and grubs. It comes down to timing and hitting that life cycle when it's soft and tender, and getting that application and that contact on them. It's also a little bit more tolerant of higher heat. So again, depending on the environment that you're using. And again, it is one of the easiest bios to start using because again, it comes in a kind of a pasty type packet. It's a biodegradable paste that you can mix into water, and you can actually take a sample, look at it under just a regular insect loop or a microscope, and if they're swimming, you're good to go. Start applying. So it's kind of it's a living pesticide almost. But you can also tank mix them if you're doing an application of another product, whether it's a fertilizer, a fungicide, or a compatible pesticide. As long as it keeps whatever it is you're adding to that tank, keeps the pH range within a habitable, 4 to 8 range, you're good. But as long as it's not a nematicide, then you're good to go. I've often tank mixed it with other things. When to use the bios. So we have a general flow chart that we have in our head that's essentially all of our protocols that have come together. And as your environmental conditions change throughout the year, that also determines, granted, we have aphids 12 months out of the year at this point because they're not dying off in the winter times, but we know kind of how our pest pressure, arrives and when it declines. And a lot of these species and the predators and the biocontrols that we're using have evolved along the same timeline and the same environmental conditions. So, depending on the time of year that we're working with, depends on what we're going to be using. Average daily temperature, your min-max makes an important difference. For example, when it comes to using Aureus, we kind of think of Aureus kind of like our Mother's Day hanging baskets because we generally start using those in early May. We want higher temperatures, and we want longer day length. They perform better they have more sunlight. Again, if you were to use them in the wintertime, you would have to increase the rate in order to get that same level of control. Same thing goes for our predatory mites. We have growers like Grow and Sell who are, their finishing houses are outside, so they're not as warm as the propagation houses inside. So we have winter mites that we'll use from January through the beginning of May, and then we switch, and that's when it's Swirsky time. So Swirsky mites come out in May when it's warmer, has more daylight, and we have better success by switching it up according to the environment and the climate. Relative humidity is also very important, especially when considering using sachets. We developed the Swirsky Ultimate sachet for the use in cannabis, but we have found it to be very helpful in other crops that also have low humidity. The paper sachets, we were finding they dry out, and that bran or the vermiculite, depending on the species, will also dry out, which then has a negative impact on those mites and kills them. So we were like, okay, we've got to come up with an answer for this. So the Ultimate sachet is actually a biodegradable mylar. I don't know if anyone can see my screen, but it has a kind of a foil packet on it with a little exit hole. I did not believe that they were biodegradable when I first started with the company, but when I did a garden cleanup one spring, There was one stuck under one of my pots in the driveway, and it was about 3/4 of the way broken down. I should have included a photo of it here, but seeing it made me actually believe it and to be able to promote it with my full chest, as they say. So again, coming back to light levels, you have a lot of species that are diurnal versus nocturnal. So ones that are out during the daytime and ones that prefer more after sunset, more into the evening. Again, the Aureus, they love to be out in the sun. They need that day length. And the chrysopa larvae tend to like it a little bit more dark. You may not always see them when you're out during the day, but towards nighttime, or if you look into the dark sides of the leaves, start turning them over, you'll start seeing them crawling around. They tend to like it in the darkness a little bit more. So that's where Koppert comes in. Like we visit our customers, we talk with them on the phone, we have Teams or Zoom meetings with them. It's really important for us to work with our growers to develop their plan based upon what are their needs, what are their pains, what are their end goals, and also what is their budget, because there are ways to work within this, and we don't want to break anyone's bank, but we want to make sure that we are getting the most efficacy, the biggest bang for your buck, essentially. When to apply them. So this photo was taken at Creek Hill Nursery here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You want to release them as soon as you get them, as soon as possible, at least. We ship our products via UPS one day. So the shipping can be a little bit expensive. Sometimes the shipping is more than the bios themselves. However, on Natural Enemies, we do have, I believe it's free shipping over 150, something like that. Again, I encourage folks, if you live near someone else, if maybe you need to combine your orders to get the free shipping, do what you got to do. But you want to make sure that you release them as soon as possible. We don't want them living in those bottles for any longer time than they've already been in there. So essentially, by the time you're getting it, it's been in transit for maybe 2 to 3 days. We don't want it any longer than that. The bottles are often shipped on their sides for a reason. It helps with the weight and oxygen distribution internally. Leaving them on their sides, you do start to see like a horizon where the mites or the predators start to rise. So it's really important before you apply them. You want to make sure you just sit and talk with someone, turn the bottle, get it incorporated, because you don't want to start applying and then have all of the predators come out in the very beginning and then have nothing left at the end. We often say too, don't refrigerate them. The only biological that gets refrigerated would be our nematodes. They can store in a refrigerator for about 3 to 4 weeks. The bios, a lot of folks think, oh, I'll put it in the fridge, it slows them down. Actually, it could either kill them or it causes excess moisture in the bottle, which can cause other fungal outbreaks and things like that we don't want to happen. So make sure we say, just if you can't get it out that same day, you need to do it the next day. Leave it in the box that it came shipped in. Sometimes, depending on the season, it will have ice packs in it. Put it in a air-conditioned room under a desk somewhere and come back in the morning for it. Especially for species like the lacewing larva, the longer you leave them in that bottle, the less larvae you have. They will start to cannibalize each other due to a lack of food. So let's say you start with 1,000 count, or the example I have written here is a 10K tub. If you leave it for 24 hours, you may end up with like 8,750. 48 hours later, you might have 6,000 in there. So we want to make sure that you're getting your full money's worth and you're the biggest bang for your buck. So make sure you release them as soon as you possibly can. And we offer multiple ship dates. So try to schedule it where you can work it in with your daily routine, or that, Thursday is my bug day. So you have it planned out that, things happen. It may not be the day, but that's generally how we try to get folks to mix it into their IPM program. And this is kind of I didn't know how to put this in the beginning or the end, but why are we using BioControls? What is the benefit to them? One is efficacy. It's very difficult to be resistant to being eaten. There's a lot of pesticides on the market now that have been out for decades. I mean, since I started my career back in the early 2000s, that like, you guys are still using this stuff. And, the products, that are out there, that some still work, there's still some efficacy to them, but, they're not coming out with it's taking longer and longer for new active ingredients to get registered and to be developed, and it takes a lot of money and time. So it's kind of important to start thinking outside of the box and in a more sustainable way. Sustainability is a big goal of ours at Koppert. Again, like I mentioned earlier, our larger packaging for the Swirsky mite that you saw in that one photo where it's a cardboard tube, that one grower, by switching to the cardboard, they were able to eliminate, I believe it was over 600 plastic bottles from their production from what they had left to discard. So it's important, and they can now just recycle the cardboard, and it's, I don't know, it makes me feel better at least to, you know, remove some of the plastics from the stream. Targeted control. No matter how good of a sprayer you think you are or how good of coverage you thought you might have gotten, these biocontrols are working in the background. They're in the nooks and crannies. They're hungry. They want to live. They want to survive. And they're doing the work for you while you're eating dinner or while you're cutting your flowers. You know, they're always actively there, working in the background, getting the job done for you. The biggest one for me as a former grower is worker and workplace safety. I never want to put on another Tyvek ever again. So unless I'm going into a cannabis facility and it's a biosecure crop, that's fine. But I think it's really important to make sure that you're protecting yourself and the folks, you know, whether it's at your home with your family and your pets, or it's the folks who work with you. It's really important. And as well as consumer safety. I think we saw a lot of change in the industry when consumers realized that the large box stores and the growers that supplied them were using neonics. When they wanted to grow pollinator gardens, when that whole buzz started, the consumers put the kibosh on it. They said, no, we don't want it anymore. And the money drives the market. That demand really was important. And it's kind of important for us to, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get into the retail and home gardener market to help explain this to them as well. You have to get past the ick factor, and there's a lot of education to be like, what is this sachet that's hanging on this philodendron that's in the greenhouse? But I think once people kind of understand that it means less chemistries or softer chemistries, that, you know, it's something that I think people will gravitate to. And again, there's no REI when you use beneficial insects. Like, you can apply them and then leave. And if you have to go back in and grab your cup of coffee, you don't have to worry about putting on your PPE or putting on a mask. There's no REI with that.
Kristen, can you define REI and PPE for everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So REI is when you spray a pesticide. It's called the re-entry interval. So the label is the law, always read the label. It can be anywhere from 4 hours to 12 hours, 24 or 48 are the top four. Anything larger than 48 is terrifying, and I don't know if that exists, but that means you cannot enter back into that treated area for 4 hours. Or if you do, you have to have proper personal protection equipment. So PPE, gloves, boots, Tyvek's face coverings, whether it's a mask or a respirator. There is none of that when you're using beneficials. We do recommend putting a dust mask on because you are applying a loose carrier material, brand vermiculite, that could cause it to be an irritant, kind of, you know, when you're mixing potting soil and you have the peat moss, you know, flying up in the air, that can do it as well. Generational changes are probably one of the biggest factors for greenhouses switching over to biocontrols. You have the older generation of growers retiring, you know, selling their businesses and getting out of the industry. And, you know, I graduated the second time in 2008, and we were just starting to be taught this in our curriculum at our schools. And I think, as, you know, if you've grown up on a family farm or in a greenhouse, you know, a lot of us have seen what pesticides can do to our elders, and it's terrifying. We also don't want to put on PPE and all the big monkey suit and have to spray. I sadly just found out that one of my former employers passed away from cancer, and I don't know if I ever saw him wear a Tyvek so when he was doing his application. So it's really important to think about how the new generation is going to be stepping into the industry and making those changes that are better for not only themselves in the growing environment, but also as the consumer when they receive it. So that's those are kind of the top reasons as to why people use them. So when you want to start developing your IPM program, there are a few things that we need to kind of look into. Oh, go back. I'm not done. Not done. There we go. We need to look at the historical information. So what yearly pest pressures do you have? What crops are you growing? What time of the year you're growing? We encourage everyone to reach out to us, your Koppert consultants. If you go to koppertus.com and you scroll to the bottom, there is a map that will show you your closest Koppert consultant. We are located all across the US. Please reach out to your extension agencies, local universities, especially state schools, and other biological consultants. You know, we're not the only game in the business, but I'm here to talk about Koppert. But again, much like pesticides and fertilizers and other application products, the rates matter. As I put here, 1.5 ounces is a lot different than 15 ounces. You know, if we come up with a plan and we say, hey, this bottle treats 3,500 square feet, then that means this bottle goes to that greenhouse, not this bottle gets split up between these 2 greenhouses, because you're not getting enough to get control. You could go the opposite way and then you're just putting a whole, you know, Swirsky mite bomb in the greenhouse and it'll be cleaned up. But we want to make sure that, you know, we've done this research to come up with our rates and to come up with our applications that, you know, follow the recommended rate. And also know your chemicals. And I know some of you probably don't even use any at all, which is totally fair. I understand. However, when you are buying products in, that should be taken into consideration. There are invisible killers that we like to call. They're, you know, pesticide residues that are on these crops. Some are treated systemically, or they're applied and they have a systemic mode of action where they're taken up by the plant and they are expressed through the foliage and through the leaves. So if, like, a prime example is like poinsettias, a lot of the transplants or the plugs that you get have been treated with a product called Safari. Safari is a systemic. The mites aren't bothered by it, but you can't use the parasitoid wasps because they bathe in that exudate in the morning when the foliage is wet, that it comes out of the plant and it kills your wasps. So it's kind of important to know what's been treated with, or what the crops have been treated with in the past. We have to ask our growers a lot of questions. Again, it's like IPM, CSI, trying to figure out, you know, what have you used? What's in that tank? What's been in that tank? We have some growers who are forced to do bifenthrin or Talstar sprays in order to sell their products to California for Japanese beetle, but they should not be using that sprayer, or the bios can't be in that same house because of the drift and the things that can happen. But we encourage our growers to, we have a website and an app called Koppert One. So you can enter the active ingredient or the trade name of the pesticide with the biocontrol, and it gives you a rating of 0 to 5, 0 being awesome, 5 being you can't use that. That will let you know what plays well with one another. So you can kind of develop your own kind of program, like, okay, well, I have this, can I use that on this? Is that safe? And it kind of helps clear up some of that confusion. And I often say, like, one of our favorite saying is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation this time of year, especially as everyone's getting started, as we're heating up the greenhouses, as we're starting to, you know, prep the beds and get our liners in and getting ready for this. I think this is a perfect time. You want to try and start clean and start as, you know, proactive as possible. You coming at a infestation with biologicals in a curative sense can be very expensive and difficult. There may be, we've had it happen where someone comes to us at the end of June and they're like, oh, it's riddled with thrips, or it has all these problems. And we're like, your boss or your wallet is not going to survive this. So here's what you need to spray. And here's our plan that we're going to start on April 2nd or 1st. And we're going to start next year with this because it's gone too far to be able to properly control the problems that you're having. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, but I have, in a true Dutch way, I have my cup of coffee here to to display. I also have this fun business and QR code. If anyone would like to scan it, that connects you directly to me through my email, my LinkedIn, socials. If you have any questions, feel free to text me. I'm sure we'll reach them in the chat as well. But that's pretty much it. I could talk about this stuff forever. I'm sure I went over, but
Oh, I don't think you went over by a moment because there's so much to learn and so much to talk about. I know if we were in a
thank you for
conference
coming to my
ballroom
TED talk.
I know if we were in a conference ballroom right now, you'd be getting a standing ovation. I think people are thoroughly impressed.
It's so much easier with 4 Zoom screens versus 200 faces.
Kristen, thank you for that. We're going to get into a bunch of questions.
Sure.
I think I've got 10 pages of questions that people have written in, so we may not get to all of them, but I'm going to kind of pick and choose maybe what I think are the bigger issues that more people are addressing. Naturalenemies.com is the place where you can buy these products. There's a chat feature there with a real live human who knows more than I do for sure on what products you might need.
Yep, they're a member of our customer service team, and we've given them our protocols and a lot of the information. And again, if they can always direct you to one of us as well.
Great. And they'll start a conversation with you because there's often some follow-up questions. So just be ready for that. Sure. Farmer Bailey is the clever discount code. So use discount code Farmer Bailey to get 10% off. I think that's going to go on for a while. That's not just a today only kind of thing. That's just there to help you try the products, learn what works best for your situation. It can be overwhelming. You mentioned a lot of common names and Latin names and trade names of, the beneficial products. And then there's also the whole side of the pests to learn. Yeah. The good thing is you generally aren't going to get all of these in one year. You might get the same couple at the same times of year. So I encourage you to keep a diary, of your weather. These days, we don't really know what to expect, but the more years of information you have, the better prepared you can be for what might be coming. But the pests are following the weather, they're following the day length, they're following the temperature, and they're going to respond in the same way almost every year. In Vermont, I grew 15,000 sweet peas a year. I had quite the aphid situation, and I was ready for them most years. One year I wasn't ready. The first year I wasn't ready and really got nailed. And once something gets out of control, it's really difficult to bring it into control sometimes. And the flip side of that is sometimes you don't want to spend the money in advance because you think it's not going to be a problem this year. But experience will tell you that it probably will be a problem every year if it was a problem in one year. So
also too, you don't have to attack or you don't have to treat all of the pest pressures that you're having that year. Choose one that you're having the worst problem with, and let's focus on that so we have success. And then we can kind of, once we get that under control, then we can start branching out to treating other things. And, it's sometimes you have to walk before you crawl, or crawl before you walk. Yeah, that's it. And, take it slow, figure out the first one, take some baby steps and, tiptoe into it. So that way you're not overwhelmed and like, oh no, it didn't work. So, find the biggest pain that you have, start with that.
Great. So let's start with the biggest pain that a lot of people have and that they generally don't know they have until it's too late. And that would be Fusarium on Lisianthus. Now, as you mentioned, Grow and Sell is treating your Lisianthus plugs before you receive them, but they're treating earlier in the process. So by the time it gets to you, it's probably a really great time to treat again. So what types of products would you recommend specifically for, well, what is Fusarium and how can we break the cycle?
Heidi, would you like to go ahead and take that?
Sure. Fusarium is a fungal disease that infects the root of various plant materials. And it's very damaging and can kill your crops. So it's important that we're preventative on it and not wait till we see symptoms. And that's why we're talking about inoculating early. The trichoderma fungus that the trianum is, it attaches to the roots and colonizes the roots and protects them from the disease actually being able to access the root. So that's the importance of getting it on early and not waiting until you see symptoms. And it's easy to apply. It's a wettable powders that you just mix with water. If you're doing a very small amount of plants, you can use a watering can, you can use a hose end sprayer, or you can use a dosatron if you've got a larger operation for that.
Great. So that's definitely prevention is the key with Fusarium. Sometimes I've seen people even showing Fusarium in the plug tray because they put their plug tray on the bare earth or on the ground on arrival, not thinking about the fact that there's roots peeking out of the bottom of that tray that can become infected with Fusarium. So you really, the first thing you want those roots to come in contact with, you know, are your beneficial fungi and bacteria.
Yeah, I recommend actually treating the plug trays, liner trays, when they come in, set them on up on a bench, treat them before you even plant them so that you've got them inoculated again prior to planting. And it uses a lot less material that way as well.
Excellent. So Fusarium and Lisianthus is a known problem. What other features does Trianum offer? You know, maybe you treat your Lisianthus and you still have quite a bit left over. What would be a good use for that? And these are living products. It's not going to survive on your shelf for years. You probably need to use it up in one season. Where else would that be beneficial in the, you know, in the process of farming?
It's useful anywhere you might have root diseases such as Pipium, Fusarium, Rhizoctonia, and Phalabiopsis. It's covered for. And field soils, it can be put in vegetable gardens, flower gardens. It's got a wide range of uses. You can use it when you're planting seed and right in the furrow with the seeds. So it's got a very vast label on it. And then when you aren't using it, you can store it in your refrigerator to keep it fresh longer. And it's got a shelf life, I believe, of 18 months on that one. Okay. So you've got about 1.5 years. So you've got a full season. You could easily use that up. I use it at my house on, you know, asparagus and raspberries and vegetables and things like that, in addition to cut flowers and perennials.
I will also add too that Trianum is also effective against root knot nematodes as well. Oh, yes. So not only against, you know, fungal pathogens in the soil, but sometimes depending on where you're growing and the conditions that you have, root nematodes or root knot nematodes that can burrow in and infect it. It will also protect the epidermis from them being able to get inside, because there are good nematodes and bad nematodes. So
perfect. It also just improves the vigor of the plant. It improves the nutrient uptake. Mm-hmm. Stronger plant is better able to fight off other pathogens. So it's really a win-win situation all around. It should be part of something that all of us are applying to our fields and our greenhouses all the time. You see a lot of conventional operations using it too, because even in a non-organic setting, it has major benefits. So,
and I just recommend if growers have crops that are particularly sensitive, like Lisianthus, you can come in and retreat that every 4 weeks or so throughout the crop cycle, just to keep adding more spores into that root zone for additional protection.
Great. So you have the big package. You haven't used it up. Why not just keep applying it? It's not going to hurt.
Keep applying it. Yep.
Only help.
It doesn't do any good in the refrigerator.
Absolutely. It's like you've seen inside my refrigerator. All right, let's talk about thrips. We got thrips on ranunculus. Thrips will hit Lisianthus, they'll hit dahlias, they'll hit pretty much everything. Probably one of our biggest flower pests, both in greenhouses and outside. So talk to me about what thrips are doing and how can we stop them?
Do you want to take it or do you want me to take it?
You could go ahead.
All right. So if you were talking about Western flower thrips, they are attacking the foliage of the plant, the leaves. They're piercing the leaves and sucking out juices out of the plant, and can be spreading disease at the same time, virus. So it's important that we keep them under control. In crops that are growing cold, typically if you're growing at 40, 45 degrees, a cold ranunculus crop, you may not see the thrips as much, except when we have nice, warm, sunny days. When the greenhouse heats up to 70, 75, 80 during the daytime, you may start to see them become active. So we need to be proactive in being in controlling them ahead of the time. There's a couple different ways you can do it. The predatory mites, we need to have certain temperatures for different predatory mites. If you want to go that route, we have Andersoni, and we have Cucumaris, and we have that are available that you can use. I would say for a cut flower crop, I would recommend Andersoni. It's a little more aggressive, and it will also impact spider mite eggs and whitefly eggs as well. So it's a little bit more cosmopolitan. And so predatory mites. And then also we have a product called Icerid, which is the Azaria fungus that Kristen talked about. And that is very effective on thrips adults and larvae when applied as a spray. And then when it's applied as a sprench or drench to the soil, is effective on the pupal stage as well.
Great. So thrips are extraordinarily tiny. You can see the damage, but unless you're really looking, you might not even notice that you have them. So the great thing about these mites. Go ahead, Kristen.
One of the examples that I like to give is, again, coming back to my analogies, is like a boxing match. You have the mites that are feeding on the first, like when the eggs hatch, you get that L1 larva, the first instar, the baby thrips. The mites are going after that early stage. If the thrips evade predation at that point, they generally drop down and then they pupate in the soil. So we want to try and target, whether it's through Icerid or through soil predators, getting the pupae at that stage. And then if they emerge, then again, especially in cool weather for something like Ranunculus, it may be better to use something like Icerid. But once it warms up, would go with the generalist predator like Aureus, which is kind of like your heavyweight fight. So you have your lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight fights trying to interrupt that life cycle because you can get them at different stages. So,
and we also have nematodes available to impact that pupal stage in the soil. The standard name of Feltier, or Entonom, is the nematode that works really well under cool temperatures for that early season control. And that can be tank mixed with the Icerid and applied that way, or applied by itself. And then I also recommend hanging sticky cards, the yellow Horiver cards, for monitoring for thrips, so you know when your first thrips are flying in or emerging from the soil or the ground from the overwintering.
Perfect. I think, I don't know, people wait too long to address their thrips problems. You can almost count on them coming in. They like almost every crop.
Everything.
And I think I saw, one of those macro images of a predatory mite just waiting for the thrips larva to pop out of the plant. It was just like sitting there waiting for it to come out so it could be eaten. And I thought that was also a very beautiful image. Right, those are some big ones. I'm seeing some cucumber beetle questions, some tarnished plant bug questions. So I think we probably have some dahlia growers in the room. Let's talk about those two that can be big problems on a lot of crops. Is there any hope?
Yes. And on those, it's kind of important to know the life cycle of those insect pests to understand. Like cucumber beetle, it lays its eggs down at the base of the plant. So nematodes in the soil may be able to impact that larval stage as it's hatching or emerging. Once it crawls up onto the plant, then we're looking at a spray application of something to knock down that nymph or that adult. The tarnished plant bug, that's laying eggs in the stem or the leaf veins, as well as the potato leafhopper, the leafhoppers people were asking about as well. That also lays its eggs in the leaves or stem. And so it's important to know where they're coming from, but then once those eggs emerge onto the plant as nymphs, then we can target them with Icerid again, or azadirachtin, neem oil. You could, if you're using biocompatible pesticides, you can use, and it's a flowering crop, you can use Aria, which is flunicimid. And in a vegetable crop, if you're growing vegetables next to flowers and that crop has it, you can use Boleth, which is another flunicimid version for vegetable crops.
Great. Yeah, they were the bane of my existence in Vermont, and I know that in certain spots they're just ever present. So,
and yeah, there's a number of different native predators like assassin bugs, big-eyed bugs that will come around if you're not using heavy pesticides and using a soft biological friendly approach. You may get nature coming in to help you, but we need to supplement that usually with some additional help because we're growing in a monoculture type situation, and you have a lot more plant material that's food for them than we have habitat for the insect, the beneficials. So
that was tarnished plant bugs. What about cucumber beetles? Different approach for cucumber beetles?
So that you can use, like I said, you could use nematodes at the very, to target the eggs and the larvae just as they're emerging and before they crawl up onto the plant. But again, you could use those same tools, the Icerid and azadirachtin, neem oil, pyrethrins, botanical pyrethrins like pyganic, things like that, if you're not using beneficial insects.
Perfect, thank you. A lot of this stuff is just some of these pests. I think you just probably will need to be spraying somewhat regularly. There's not like a one one-time application that's going to protect you all season, unfortunately.
Like Kristen said in her presentation, like with the Icerid and the other microbiological products, it's really important to do that regular application, because what we're doing is we're infecting the insect, but we're also creating an intolerable environment for the insects to reproduce successfully. By hitting them each week with a fungal organism, you're eliminating a number of those adults and nymphs each week, and they just can't build numbers then.
Very good. A lot of questions about whiteflies and also aphids. So take your pick. Where do you want to start?
Whiteflies is again Icerid. That organism was actually the Asaria fungus was actually first identified off of a whitefly. So that is the perfect product for that insect pest. And
so this is the one that infects the body of the insect, and then the fungal spores grow out of it. Yep. That really gruesome image.
Yeah, and if you want to supplement that, if it's a real severe, if you have a lot of pressure from whitefly, you can also use Swirsky mite. The predatory mite Swirsky will attack the egg stage of whitefly. And you can also use then the Encarsia and Aromoceras, the intermix cards that she showed in one of her slides that you hang in the crop, and then the parasitic wasps that are in pupation on that card fly off once they emerge and fly into the crop and attack the larval and pupal stage.
Great. Okay, let's talk about aphids. They are delicious. Everything likes to eat aphids. Aphids are easy to kill and yet almost impossible to get rid of.
Yes.
Do you want to take that one, Kristen?
Oh, goodness, yes. So again, it comes down to identification. Send some photos, take some pictures, preferably non-blurry pictures. It can be kind of, they're so similar in species. Again, I am a huge fan of the lacewing larvae, the video that I showed. They are voracious predators, and just keeping them introduced. And the parasitoid wasps, the parasitoid wasps take time. So it's something that if you know that you have peach aphids on this crop that come every year, then you know to start just introducing as you start that crop, or as that crop starts to, expand and to have some foliage for the aphids to feed on. Because it takes a little bit of time. It takes about a week or two to really have them that life cycle to complete itself and to build the population that you need. And again, sometimes we talk to a lot of our growers, and it does come down to having to do some sprays, whether it's an oil spray or other chemistries to knock down that population a little bit. But they're getting harder and harder to treat for. Is it the Mysis 2.0 that we're talking about, Heidi? That it's almost like a new species in itself, or new subspecies, where it's just becoming more resistant and more difficult to treat. So again, a combination of Icerid, other chemical applications, the lacewing larva, and the parasitoid wasps are probably your best bets.
Great. Just a reminder, we're not going to solve all problems today, but if you go to naturalenemies.com, there is a chat feature with a live human who can really help guide you. A lot is going to depend on your location, your temperature. Is this field grown? Is this greenhouse? There's a lot of factors, but these people have thought through all of this many times, as you can tell by their expertise shared today.
And speaking of which, I want to just give a shout out to Jared, who's holding it down in the chat, answering questions. He's our natural enemies guy, Dr. J. He's doing a great job of answering for folks. So thank you, Jared, for showing up.
Thanks so much. If you were fortunate to join us live today, the chat has been a real masterclass on biological control, but these same people are available to help you individually with your problems. I have a couple more insect questions, but let's talk about mildew. Powdery mildew can be a big issue. Are any of these products good for spraying on as a foliar application? Will that help reduce or interrupt the mildew cycle?
Go ahead,
for mildew, yeah, there's a number of products labeled for use as fungicides that are bacillus strains. Bacillus muliliquefaciens and Bacillus subtilis, and they're going to work best as preventative tools. There's a product called Millstop that will help stop mildew, but again, it's something you have to keep applying weekly. You can't just see the mildew, and apply it and be finished. You're going to want to keep coming in weekly with that, or even more frequently when the conditions are right for those mildew spores to sporulate. And one thing you can look at doing is incorporating a silicon type product into your fertility program, which silicon helps strengthen cell walls and makes it more difficult for those fungal hyphae to get into the cuticle and infect the plant. So it's just starting to think about plant health and building your plant health up to better fight off that plant pathogen from the inside out.
Yeah, great tips. Also, just monitoring your conditions when mildew likes a certain set of conditions, and when you see that happening in your environment, you know that mildew is going to start showing up on your plants. So, any advice for botrytis while we're on fungi?
The same bacillus.
Yeah, okay. Same bacillus species. Yep, Satilis. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, no, those are probably the two most common foliar and even on the flower fungal problems. But this is fun. We got flowers and shoots and roots and everywhere in between, and this is really exciting. Okay, we've had a couple beetle questions, Japanese beetles and the Asian garden beetle, which I didn't even know was a thing, but the internet tells me it is.
Asiatic garden beetle. Yeah, it's a fairly new insect that showed up, I think, in about 2001. I started seeing just recently news about it, but I saw a notice that it was 2001. I think that it came around. So the controls are similar for both Japanese beetle and that, because they have a grub stage in the soil. So Larvae, which is our Heterabidus bacteriophora nematode. And again, timing on that is important. And I haven't looked into the Asiatic beetles timing, but the timing on the Japanese beetles is in the late July, early August in the Midwest, in the Northeast. As further you go south, probably the earlier would be maybe into July. You want to target the young larva. The life cycle of it is the adult is overwintering, emerges in the spring, lays eggs in July or June, and then they hatch out. So July, August, you're in a larval stage. And then that larval stage starts to move down in the soil deeper to overwinter. It actually overwinters as that grub stage then. And so you want to get it while it's young and juicy for the nematodes to work on in July and August, because it's easier to infect a smaller larva than it is a bigger, grub. And they are more up at the surface of the soil. And then you can apply those nematodes, like I said, with a garden hose end sprayer, or with a backpack, or any kind of a drenching apparatus you might have.
Great. So sometimes you need to be thinking almost a full year in advance of the problem what to treat. So I think that's probably why many of us get that schedule wrong, because you wait until you see the problem, at which time it is too late to do much about it.
Right. When you see the beetles, yeah, then but you could start treating then in August, and that's the time to treat. But you'll see the beetles in May already chewing your plants up, and it's difficult to control them at that stage.
Yeah, when you're planting or you're planning your plug trays and the liners that you're buying, think about your IPM control as well, and kind of get that kind of going alongside with it. Like, oh, last year we had this issue. Okay, well, we're not going to have it again this year, because you're thinking ahead of it. So we never get to, as farmers and growers, we never get to enjoy the season that we're in. We always have to be 3 to 6 months ahead of ourselves. So incorporate your IPM plan in with whatever it is you're purchasing and plotting for next year.
I think maybe that's one of the tricky things to learn about getting your plugs also, is placing your order so far in advance that there's time for the grower to source the seed and grow that 12-week Lisianthus crop and get it to you when you need it. So advanced planning is the way to go. We could get into some really fine point questions about all sorts of stuff. Someone suggested maybe we need to do individual sessions on different pests and different products, and I think that sounds like fun. So we'll talk about that later. So really great general
Here's
question.
The bug, we'll bring it.
Someone just tore on how to get started. Clearly, we all want to use fewer chemicals or no chemicals at all. We talked about a lot of products, a lot of pests, a lot of cures, a lot of names. Take a deep breath. And where should people start? Obviously, starting in the soil and the roots is always a great way to ensure plants to succeed. Yeah, maybe we'll end with just some general basic advice if you're really wanting to get into more biological control, where to begin if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed.
You want to go, Heidi, or I don't mind?
I can start. So I guess initially the first questions I always ask a grower when I'm visiting them is, what are your goals? Do you want to not spray ever? Do you want to never see the insect pest? Do you just want to live at peace with it and have it not ruin your crop and have some kind of a hybrid approach to manage it? Do you want to use only biologicals, that's going to be quite expensive, or are you okay using a hybrid approach with some biocompatible pesticides along with the natural enemies and the biologicals? So we need to you just have to have a stop and think of yourself and where you want to be and how you want to get there. And then reach out to the chat feature here, reach out to Kristen or I, and ask us questions, because it is hard to navigate this on your own. There's a lot of information to cover, and we've done this a lot of times, so we can fairly quickly, just listen to what you're dealing with and help you through that, I think.
Yeah. Great advice. Kristen, any parting shots?
Yes, just figuring out, what was the biggest pain that you had last year? Did you have a crop failure? Did something not meet the expectations that you needed or wanted it to? And okay, if it's in Lisianthus, then let's start with some Trianum in the soil. Let's just start there. Let's take it one step at a time. Then it's like, oh, well, I've got sawfly larva on this other crop, or I've got powdery mildew on my zinnias. And, take it one step at a time. We want you to succeed. And, remember, as you said, take some good notes as to what happened, that year before. And, try to just learn from, every good grower has a trail of compost behind them of all the mistakes that we've made. So I think, you can keep making the same decisions and getting the same results, or you can try to figure out a way to make it easier and make it successful for yourself. So, choose the most important or the biggest issue, and just start with one at a time. And then we can build it. And it honestly becomes second nature at that point, because you become so used to just, oh, well, we got our Lizzies, they're all on the bench in the greenhouse. We're going to go ahead and do our Trianum transplant. And I know 2 weeks later, I'm going to do it again. It becomes a rhythm, as, anything else that you do with your growing. So.
I like the idea of the bug journal, and you could even just have a calendar on your wall calendar, Japanese beetle adult sighted today, first time this year, just make notes of first fungus gnats arrived with the liners, and, make some notes of when you first see your first thrips, get those cards out early, and just be proactive, and then look at them for the next year. So you kind of can see some trends forming them too.
As you walk your crops with your cup of coffee or tea in the morning, make observations, flip some leaves and see what's going on. And again, we're here to help in any way we can. Both Jared and our manager, Jeremy, are both answering questions in here. We have a large team of nerds that are here to help everyone. So reach out to us. We are here for you. And again, also too, extension agents, anyone that's close to you, depending on how far out you are, there are resources available, and, we can help connect you in any way we can.
All right. Nerds unite. I like it.
Go bugs.
Yeah. Heidi and Kristen, thank you so much. I know Kristen and I started chatting sometime last year, and it was immediately apparent that we needed to have some kind of partnership, and the information you have perfectly meets the needs of the people we deal with every day. So I'm glad we've bridged this gap. Thank you so much for extending the discount to our customers. Again, naturalenemies.com. That discount code is Farmer Bailey. That'll get you 10% off your order. There are some products that are only available in a larger format. This could be because of just production needs, or they maybe were developed for really big growers in mind. This small scale, specialty flower grower around the US is kind of a new concept in horticulture worldwide. There's no one doing it quite the way we're doing. When we talk to people around the world about what you amazing growers are doing in America, they're really interested and amazed to find out, like, they're growing 100 crops in the same place. Like, who does that? It's like, well, we do. And I'll say that Koppert is listening to your needs. I think as time goes on, we're going to see packaging and sizes tailored more towards what you need. In the meantime, find someone local if you feel like it's too much for you to absorb. See if you can share it. See if there's maybe another use for this product that you have on hand already. We're at the start of something new and exciting here, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Me too. I mean, working with Grow and Sell, it was one of those things where I'm like, hey, we're working with them. Why are we not working with you guys? Like, let's extend that beyond to the end user, right? So let's tap into this and see what we can do. And I think, you know, some of our bottles or our packaging may seem rather large. However, in my house alone, I can use one of our large bottles of the Entomite easily. I have a lot of house plants. So, you know, it may seem larger, you know, in the beginning, but it may actually, you know, work out for our advantage. But again, demand drives the market, you know, and as much as, you know, if you guys make the noise, we'll make it happen. So as long as we know that there's an outlet for it, we will. Koppert is always adapting and changing and trying to find new ways to, you know, work with growers of all kinds. And I think that was something that we picked up on the flower tour where, you know, hey, a lot of snowflakes make a blizzard, and, you know, it's a huge deal. And, you know, it's not until they start knocking on the door that, you know, we can start doing these things for everyone. So.
Well said. All right. With that, I think we'll sign off. Thanks, everyone. Happy spring. We're getting into the busy planting season. I think this is perfectly timed. Obviously, let us know how we can help you at Farmer Bailey. And now you have one more resource at your disposal ready to help you. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you, Farmer Bailey.
Thank you, everyone.